fires and the humming wires. Yeah, man, you know you're never coming back.
One of the most asked questions at the moment is regarding self-employment. So we get asked all the time if we do self-employment, and the answer to that is no, we don't, which I'll explain a little bit about later on. But for the industry generally, self-employment has been quite a contentious issue for a number of years, but it's grown in popularity. And it's grown in popularity because of, I think, the economics, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But the industry now has kind of pivoted to where most people, the majority of people in the industry, are self-employed over those who are employed. And we've got to ask ourselves the question as to why this has happened. And secondly, why has not everybody gone down this route? So what are the big questions around it? Why do some do and some don't? And what are the challenges and what are the opportunities within it? And I thought, well, rather than getting on a kind of moral crusade as to do's and don'ts, or want to sort of sit on the fence one way or the other, I thought, well, let's just look at the numbers and address why I think people have chosen this route first and foremost, and then we'll address the potential challenges with it as well. So the way we're going to look at it, we're going to take two stylists, one stylist who's employed, and another stylist who's self-employed, and we're going to look at how the economics of how their sort of remuneration is calculated based on how this works, on how each individual, which structure you decided to kind of go down. And I'll explain a little bit as we go along, but I want this to be a purely economic exercise to start off with, then we'll talk a little bit about the other elements of it as we move forward. So we'll get into the numbers in a couple of minutes. But just to give you the overview before we get into the numbers, we're working on the premise that this particular, the two examples we're going to have will be a stylist who's employed in a salon, and I'll talk a little bit about how we've calculated their pay as we go through. The self-employed stylist, well, self-employment has a number of different options. There's the straightforward rental, where you pay rent, a set amount of money every week or every month for your chair in a salon or your room or whatever booth, whatever, how you would describe your space within the premises. Very simple transaction, effectively a bit like a landlord. You pay for that space, it's yours, you can do what you want with it. That's option one. Option two is where you pay some rent, as in the first example, but there's an element of share, a certain share of the commission, of the split, if you like, of the takings of that individual stylist. And then the third example, which is the one we're going to use, is basically a split. You share whatever income is produced by that individual stylist. There's a split, and that's how it works. And so for this particular example, we're working on a 50-50 split. The reason we've used that, or I've used that, is because it's based around an example that was given to Chris and I a little while ago, where a stylist was being paid 50%, and the question was, is that good? Is it bad? So I thought, well, it's a good example, so let's use that example. And for the easiness of the calculations, we're going to work on that particular example. So let's get into it. So stylist A is an employed stylist, as we said, and this individual is contracted to a salon, and so as a contracted employee, as a stylist, will work to the guidelines, the values and systems of the salon, is under the control of the salon. We'll have set hours, we'll have set entitled holidays, breaks, etc. So all the benefits that come from being an employee. And there are numerous benefits to being an employee, which I'll talk about as we go through. So let's just get into the numbers. And what we're going to do for both of these examples is to work on the premise that both of these stylists have taken the same amount of money in 1 week in the salon, and that number I've used is £1,500. So that might be higher than what an average stylist would make in your salon. It might be lower, but for the simplicity of the exercise, we're making it £1,500, just for example. So, stylist A has weekly services, grows at £1,500, as I've said. Now, because she works in a salon, we're taking the basis of this salon would be VAT registered. It'd be of a certain size, and so is a VAT registered salon. So the first calculation that needs to be made is we need to take the VAT off. So their services are gross, and so if we remove the VAT element is £250. So that's the first, I suppose, when I talk about how economics is driving self-employment, the first element is, can we remove the VAT? So is it possible to get around paying VAT? And this is one way of doing it, because this salon has to pay VAT because it's taken over, and we work on the assumption that it does over £85,000 turnover in a year, so it's VAT registered. So the first thing we have to do with the gross services is remove the VAT, and as I said, that's £250. So what it leaves us with is a net total of weekly services at £1,250. Now, again, that dramatically reduces the money we have to share, and it brings it down to what the reality is for this particular stylist. So they've taken £1,500 in physical money in the till. The reality is, we've only got £1,250 to play with. The £250 goes straight to the VAT account, and it's not our money. Now, for this example, I'm going to work on the premise that this stylist earns 35%, whatever combination of how you calculate this. So for some salons, it's 3 times basic plus 10% of this, and blah, 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 blah. But just for a general kind of example, I'm going to say this stylist gets 35% of her net services as a salary. And so for this stylist, 35% of the £1,250 that she's taken for the salon ends up being £437.50. So that gives us a kind of gross salary for this individual stylist. Now we have to take off, or what has to be paid is taxed by her. So, and again, these aren't scientific calculations. So if you're a bookkeeper or an accountant and you're looking at this and you're questioning whether that's right or wrong, I'm not. I'm basing this onto some basic calculations, but I think they're pretty close, to be fair. So income tax of £36.50. National insurance, employees' national insurance would be at £30.54. She's registered for pensions, which for this example at 5% would be £21.88. That leaves us with a net pay of £350.04. So that's how her individual salary is broken down. So we start at £1,500 and she ends up with £350.04. Now, this is where sometimes salon owners are tempted to go down the self-employment route, because the employee sometimes looks at that and says, I've taken £1,500 for you, and all I get at the end is £350. So it looks like they're not getting a very good deal, because we haven't really explained what the income tax and the national insurance, pension contributions, and we haven't really educated our stylist on the benefits and of being employed. Now, that's not the only cost we have. So as an employer, we have costs as well. And so again, following on the example of stylist A, first of all, she has 6 weeks full holiday pay. So, which is fantastic. And again, this is a selling point to our stylists. So 6 weeks full holiday pay. We have employers' national insurance. So there's a cost to us employing our people of £30.54. We have our employers' pension contributions. So again, we're contributing to our employees' pension contributions. And so that's a £13.12 contribution. So you can sort of see that people are expensive. Now, this particular stylist has reached over her minimum wage for her age because of the amount of money she's taken. She may not actually have reached minimum wage in terms of her potential commission, and so we start to build into where people and employing people is expensive, and it's getting more and more expensive. And so I think as an industry, because our prices haven't kept in line with the cost of inflation, if you like, with cost of product, cost of people, etc. So we've fallen behind. So how do I keep the employee motivated? How do I keep them rewarded whilst at the same time not putting myself in a precarious position? And so I look at all these costs, and either yourself or maybe an accountant or a bookkeeper will say, well, this is costing you too much money, so why don't you make them self-employed? And so we look at that as an example. We go, okay, well, how does that work? And so we're going to take stylist B now. And stylist B, let's just go back for 1 second. So the entire salary package for an employed stylist, when you calculate it out over a 12-month period, usually is around 40 to 43%, maybe 45 if they're not reaching target, or you're paying minimum wages more often than not. So when we talk about this, a self-employed stylist having a 50-50 split, for all the benefits of being employed, the 43% for being employed doesn't seem that far away from a 50-50 split. But again, we have to educate our team to understand why the costs of being employed and the benefits to them, which I'll explain a little bit later. So let's go into stylist B. Stylist B is self-employed. She's taken £1,500 again for the salon, or not for a salon, for herself. And so we have to sort of divide that up. So now this stylist at £1,500 is not going to be, VAT won't come into the equation with this particular person, and most self-employed stylists don't pay VAT. And so it takes a salon straight away into gives them a 20% advantage, because if they're charging the same amount of money and not paying VAT, they're effectively getting more of the share. If they're below the VAT threshold and they're not adding the VAT to their prices, then they're invariably they look cheaper and so maybe more attractive to the client. Either way, there's a 20% advantage between an employed salon over a self-employed salon. So at £1,500, no VAT to pay. So we've got a larger slice of the pie to play with. So what costs have to come out from here? And so, as I said, VAT is non-applicable. And so her 50% would be £750. So quite a generous salary for someone taking £1,500. And so this stylist that's a substantial amount of money for weekly pay. So then we look at the tax implications. The employed stylist had to pay income tax, national insurance, pension contributions, and have all that deducted from their salary before they get to net pay. So it's taken obviously as the pay as you earn for the pay as you earn system. So all calculated for them. But this person's self-employed, so effectively they're a company in themselves. So companies pay their tax usually a couple of times a year. It's calculated at the end of their tax return, and it's not done on a kind of weekly or monthly or 4-weekly basis. So for this particular example, that money goes straight to the stylist. I have put a couple of costs in here because I think it's important to show the comparisons or discrepancies is probably a better word. So income tax depends on the end of the year, and I'll show you an example in a little while as to how that what that could show up as. And then you have national insurance and national class 2 national insurance contributions. If you're under a sort of just over £6,000 profit, is about £3 a week. So I mean that's a massive difference in terms of what an employee is paying in terms of national insurance. And so there's the employee's paying national insurance, the employer's paying national insurance, and a self-employed person is basically paying £3 a week. There's a huge benefit to that at the moment, if it stays that way in terms of where they are. Pensions, well, it's up to the stylist themselves whether they want to set their own pension up, but there's no obligation for you to set a pension for them, and so it's entirely down to them. So they effectively walk out the door with £747 at the end of the week. So you can see how the economics are sort of stacking up in favour of self-employment here. So are there other elements to think about? Well, let's have a quick look. So let's look at their potential income tax or tax, what they could have to pay in tax at the end of the year. So let's work on the premise that this stylist has maintained, is very consistent, and has maintained 48 weeks at £1,500 exactly. I've put 48 weeks because the chances are they'll take some holiday. You've got Christmas, you've got other things, and although most employed stylists will get 6 weeks holiday, the statistics say that most self-employed people don't take as much holiday because they don't earn any money when they're on holiday. So one work on the premise of that they've had 4 weeks holiday or four weeks of time off through this particular year, and in total they've earned £36,000 in salary or in turnover for their individual business. Now they get the same allowance as an employee, so they can earn up to £12,000 a year tax-free. So that brings that down to £24,000. And so, have they got other costs that they can put against it? Well, yeah, they'll have, I'm sure, depending again on their structure and their system. They'll have costs potentially of travel, of uniform, training. There's numerous things that they can offset against their tax or their turnover to minimise their tax at the end of the year. So I've sort of allowed for 20%. I'll put on there 20% of that. So of their total turnover, and let's say they manage to scramble £7,200 worth of costs. That might be high, might be low, I don't know. I've never worked that out in terms of, I'm not a self-employed stylist and don't employ self-appointed, or don't have a self-employed stylist, but I'm just, again, playing around with the figures just to demonstrate here in this example, which will give them a net profit of £16,800, and based on that, corporation tax is currently at 20%. Their tax bill at the end of the year would be around the £3,360 mark. So that's their kind of tax benefit. So if we kind of break it down then into a straight comparison, so in terms of net pay, because very often that's purely what our team or our stylists look at. We look at it in relation to net pay, and the difference is between these two. So let me if I just give you the example here of the self-employed again. So now adding in that particular example for tax into a weekly amount, they'd get the 1,500, VAT not applicable, brings it down to 750. Income tax then, based on that example of the 3,000, etc., would give them a weekly tax bill of £70. National insurance still at the £3, might be a little bit more because you've gone over the 6,000 threshold. But ultimately, the net pay would probably be around the 670, maybe 650 mark. Obviously, for this is just a very rough example here. So what's the difference? So the net pay of stylist between the two, there's a net difference of around about £326.96. So that's almost double, to be honest. So it's the employed stylist, based on them taking £1,500, so they've taken the same amount of money from their clients and doing their clients, and one walks out the door at the end of the week with £350.04. The other one walks out the door with £670 plus. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? And if we look at the numbers, bring that slide up, in terms of what the difference is, the stylist who is employed, the reason they walk out with so much less is because they pay VAT, they pay employees national insurance, national insurance gets paid for them, pensions, holiday pay, they get maternity pay, they get potentially sick pay, and they get training paid for them. From a self-employed stylist, the salon pays no VAT, no national insurance, no pensions, no holiday pay, no maternity pay, no sick pay, probably no training. So the costs from running one system over another system are, well, they speak for themselves, to be fair. So it's a no-brainer. From the economic perspective, a stylist is better off being self-employed financially than being employed from a purely financial. No, there are going to be people out there who says, well, I've got a different split. I get 70, 30, I get 60, 40, and they pay a bit of rent. And there could be all sorts of different examples and different anomalies out there around this that maybe balance it out a little bit. But ultimately, you wouldn't make your stylist self-employed if there wasn't a benefit to the stylist. I mean, we haven't looked at it in terms of what the salon gets here, but what comes into play now is, well, there's no VAT payable on the stylist's income, but does that mean that the £750 that the salon owner would receive, is there VAT on that? Well, if there's only one stylist in the salon, then the answer's no. If there's two stylists in the salon, the answer's still no. But you get to a third stylist earning £1,500, and then yes, it takes the individual salon itself as in terms of a business renting space or receiving income from other people for the services that they're providing. It takes them into the VAT threshold. So it could be that, you know, if you've got more than 3, 4, 5 stylists self-employed in your salon, that you're paying VAT on your income, even though the stylist isn't paying VAT on their income. Hope that makes sense. So the VAT element potentially comes into it from a salon owner's perspective. So if it is a no-brainer, why is the question? Why isn't everybody doing it? And I think when you start to analyse why that is, then there are a number of factors that we have to consider if we're starting to look at those or look at this as a potential option for our business. And the question ultimately for me is about vision. What is it you were trying to build and grow and create when you opened your salon day one? What is it you wanted? What legacy did you want to leave? What type of salon did you want to have? And for me personally, it was about growing a successful salon, a big salon. I wanted a large team. We wanted to have that success. It wasn't to build a salon and then rent chairs out to everybody. That wasn't the route for me, because I want to control and I want to maintain that vision for the business and guide these people through the industry, because very often, and especially now when people come into it, they don't really know what that route is going to look like. And I think that the joy of taking a young stylist or a young trainee and then training them to be a great stylist and then watching them grow and helping to mentor them and helping them to build a client base, to improve their skills, is still for me the vision I want for my business. And self-employment does not give me that option. Yes, now you can create your hybrid version of it, which is where the industry is really, where I hear salon owners who have some employed, some self-employed, some all self-employed, but they still talk about them as if they're their team. My team this, I've got this stylist who's doing, and they're talking about them as if they're still employees, and that is wrong. I mean, it's because I've chosen it because it saves me money, but ultimately I want to control, and I want to motivate, and I want these people to work to my standards. And the minute you make them self-employed, then technically, to the letter of the law, you shouldn't be doing that. And so we run into these kind of grey areas. And so what they do is they create these things where they'll say, well, I don't tell them what to do, but we've collectively agreed to follow this standard, and the standard they've collectively agreed to follow is the same standard they had when they were working for the salon owners. So, as I said, most of the best salons in the UK still have, predominantly, they are employed status salons. And they do that because to run a great salon requires you to have a cohesive team, that you have control over the standards, that you set the values, you have a vision. I mean, you have something that gets you up early in the morning, and you can go in and work with your teams to grow them. And if it's all about saving a bit of money, then for me that isn't an option I would choose, because I don't see that as a long-term plan. The Chancellor said, when he talked about helping self-employed people through the lockdown, there was a little and I'll probably pop that in a second. There was a little short snippet where he said, and we've seen the disparities between employed and self-employed in the example earlier. But the Chancellor said this, and he said, moving forward, you cannot expect to be helped and then not to have to pay in the same amount that the employed people have been paying in, and moving forward, and there'll be some rebalancing, whatever that means. And I think the challenge will be if they do something with the VAT, in other words, they lower the threshold to 50 or 30 or eliminate it, the industry will have a much fairer system where all the salons will be in the same boat. And I think if they give self-employed stylists, let's use hairdressing, to help self-employed stylists, employee rights in terms of they need to have holiday pay, they need to pay some sort of pay as you earn or national insurance or something like that, then there's no value to being self-employed. We start to move into flexibility and things like that. But one of the things that's interesting is if it's not about economics, and no salon owner has ever said to me, I've done it for the money, it's always been because we want to create flexibility. I have 15, 16 stylists at the moment, and I would say just under half of them are part-time because they've got children. And so when they've come back after having children, we've sat down with them and we've negotiated, reduced hours. We've worked around them. Some worked shorter days. Some people work less days. So we can, as an employed status salon, can offer flexibility to their staff. So I don't know what flexibility means. Well, I do for a self-employed stylist, and the self-employed flexibility in a self-employed stylist is, can I go? I've got no in after 3, so I'm going home. I've got no in until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, so I'm going to come in at 11. Why have they got this white space? And in an employed status salon, that's the time we would train. That's the time when they would train, when they would learn. And actually, you should have some downtime because downtime is not pleasurable as a stylist, because you want to be busy. And if you're not busy, then the question is, why are they self-employed and why are they in that position? Because at that point, they still need guidance, they still need help, and they still need support. And as a salon owner, that's our job to build and grow stylists from that point of view. So for me, you have to be clear about what vision you want for your business and stick to that even when things get tough. And so moving forward, to kind of finish the argument, if you like, although I can see the economics, attractive economics of self-employment, it would never sway me that route, because it wouldn't change it just isn't part of the vision I have for my business. And when I look at most great salons, they're all employed, and I think success leaves clues. And I want to follow success. I don't want to follow the route to tax evasion. Okay? Guys, take care. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you want any more information from Winning Ways, please click on the information below, or follow us on Instagram or through our Facebook. And we're getting slowly but surely getting into this social media. Take care. Bye-bye.
His shadow is cast wherever he stands. Stacks of green paper in his red